Willkommen, bienvenue after that heraldic guitar solo on the way in there. I just want to thank all of you for sticking with us as we work through. Property Matters podcasts are becoming quite a thing right now. If you noticed in this shameless plug, there are four various different vehicles that Hamish and I have put together that cover each week, and hopefully keep your eyes and ears out for them. But for today, welcome to Wendy Gibson from the First Time Buyers Club, Hamish McClay of Search Convey, and here we are at Property Matters talking about all things property. And today's topic is, where are the next generation of property owners? And as is traditional, Hamish, please start us off.
Well, welcome, a glorious sunny day that we have here. We are fortunate indeed. Many of you within the audience will recognize Wendy. She does join us on other podcasts, but this is the first time we're just sat with Wendy on our own, which is really good. It's a great opportunity, but also it's an important topic we're speaking about, because the first time buyers themselves have a significant influence on the way in which the property market itself moves, and it helps the property market to move in the right direction. And without if you like, without those efforts from that first time buyers group, really the property market would become pretty well stationary. So we rely on it so much. However, there are obstacles. Now, strangely, they aren't just new obstacles. There are always obstacles. The obstacles just change around. Now, this is where the expertise of working with somebody like Wendy sort of comes into the whole equation. Because we work with somebody like Wendy, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are, she will be able to guide you through that particular sort of direction. And of course, having her here to actually sort of speak, because with the work she's already doing, with her sort of vast experience in housing, which, I mean, we were just sort of speaking about one of my colleagues from Ipsos. She was just celebrating 21 years. We've been working on it in 21 years. And I think, in actual fact, Wendy can confirm for us, it's a couple of decades for her as well, perhaps more. But it, as I said, it's great. What is going on? Where can we see this new generation coming from?
Wendy, please help us out. Where are they?
Well, interestingly, everything to do with property people think is just about bricks and mortar, but there is so much more to it than just that. It's not just talking about finances, which is another topic very related to property, legal stuff, which is also highly relative to property, but it's also down to economics and even demographics. So one thing is quite clear is that the newer generations coming through, there are fewer people born in those generations as they were born in the famous boomer generation, for example. But be that as it may, people are still living longer. So gone are the days where maybe you were lucky if you knew your grandparents. Nowadays, it's quite likely that you'll even know your great-grandparents. So in spite of the fact that the generations are smaller, it's still putting a greater demand on property, because as people are living longer, they're forming, instead of say 2 or 3 layers of generations each needing their own home, it's now becoming 3 or 4 levels of generations needing their own home.
Wow. So it really has changed. I mean, are we heading towards, like they do on the continent, more generational living?
It's definitely a trend. You're starting to see families forming multi-generational households where you'll have parents, grandparents, and then the children all still living under the same roof. So, and even property development is starting to trend towards the direction of building houses with more bedrooms in them rather than small starter homes with 2 to 3 bedrooms. Now, the typical average is a 4 or 5, maybe even a 6-bedroom home.
Well, the interesting thing is, and we went back in just after the Earth cooled, when we had colonies. Of course, we had people coming from the colonies coming over here to settle. quite rightly, and bringing multi-generational living with them. And I remember when I was young, thinking, how do they all live? But now it's become almost de rigueur, isn't it?
Indeed. I expect to see over the next few years buildings which look like homes but might actually have completely self-contained apartments within those homes, so that the families themselves can live together but still keep a level of separation and privacy between the different generations. Because let's face it, I'm sure Granny is wants a little bit of peace and quiet when the kids are making noise and playing, and when the teenagers have their boyfriends or girlfriends around, they probably want a bit of privacy.
Probably. Hamish, so we're going back to where it all started, because I think if we go back 100, 200 years, that was the norm back then, and gradually it became more sophisticated for the children to fly the nest. But now they seem to fly the nest and then come back again.
I trust you weren't intimating that I was around at the time of this actually happening.
No, just like you came around slightly later.
I just wondered. It does actually remind me, relative to what Wendy just said. I haven't done much traveling abroad. I still think there's some fascinating parts of this country that we haven't yet seen. I don't regret not having gone abroad. I'll do that in another lifetime. However, I did go to Cyprus. This was a few decades ago now. Actually, it was back in the 80s. And I couldn't understand it initially, because wherever you actually sort of went, there appeared to be these properties and there was nothing underneath. They all started on the first floor.
Right.
And you're thinking, well, why would they do that? You know, were they frightened of the animals or whatever was it to let animals sort of scurry around underneath? And it was actually explained to me by one of the locals what they actually do. That was saved for the next generation. When the children grew, because they already had the basics for the building there, they had the uprights there, they just put the building together. And then as the family got up, they could actually sort of move down. They could actually be living downstairs. So that was the intent. But it is an important thing. It's not such a bad thing. I mean, we've heard of such things as granny flats and many, many things of that. And it does actually solve an awful lot of situations. If we think of the caring aspect, now, not everybody wants to do the caring. I mean, I know we looked after my mother-in-law for a long, long time. But not everybody can actually do that or is willing or really has the time to do it this day, because we're all out there sort of working. But it can solve an awful lot of challenges, particularly for the authorities. It can save so much and have an impact on sort of social housing. Because the trouble is, what actually happens, it's assumed that if you've got a large family, you've got loads of money. So these house prices aren't exactly cheap. So it's very important to actually be able to work through the framework. Off with smaller.
One thing I noted was when we were looking after my parents, and we did it there was an option at one point for my father to go into a rest home of some sort. And then we realized that if we did that, very quickly, the inheritance would just drain away, because they're charging, add a figure, add a random number of zeros to it. And that's what the weekly cost is. So I mean, in a world where you have an aging population anyway, and you've got a relatively small number of houses to deal with, this would seem to be a logical direction, wouldn't it, Hamish?
I think so. And it really does. And it should theme the direction in which we're actually going in terms of the property we build. It's a significant difference to the way what we can guarantee in life is going to change. And one of the things we so often don't we blame the situation, we blame the circumstances. Right. It's life. That's what life is at the moment. And of course, this is what Wendy has to look at, and sort of help people out, sort of gauge their steps relative to how it is. And then all of a sudden we find it changes, because we know so many things have changed this year. Right. But it is changing so much. what is happening on that sort of first step. And I think one of the things as well, we're tending to find, because of cost and all sorts of other aspects, that children are staying at home longer. Some of the parents aren't exactly impressed with that particular situation. They would prefer it not to be the case. And some of the children would prefer it not to be the case either. But it would come back down to, as Wendy was mentioned earlier, it's the financial aspect of what's going on, which is a very, very significant factor.
Wendy, given that this is potentially the direction of travel, and given that they're going to be building, theoretically, all those thousands of new homes very soon, I keep my fingers crossed, would it be that those homes should really have in mind, like Hamish said, that they do in Cyprus, this concept whereby they've already thought through that there could be a section where the parents could end up staying, where the children could end up looking up to them? I think that we are working towards a caring society on that basis. What are your thoughts?
I absolutely agree. And I think if there's a developer out there who's wondering what kind of niche they should consider looking at to go into, this would certainly be one of them. And it just makes so much logical sense. Obviously, multi-generational living is not going to be for everybody, but immediately I can see so many different benefits. First of all, you've got the equity that the parents can put in from the sale of their original homes. You've got not just the parents themselves who are potentially still earning an income, but the kids as well. So they can pull their earnings together to get a better mortgage. Right. Equally, you've, exactly as Hamish said, you've then got people living locally to each other to provide care and support for the grandparents. And then if it's structured legally in a clever way, like, for example, putting the property in a trust rather than individual ownership, you could potentially have a legacy asset that can be passed from generation to generation without having to incur stamp duty costs, for example, every single time one party passes on and it has to get inherited by the next party. So,
I believe if you give it as a gift to the children, for instance, then after 7 years, it doesn't attract IHT as well.
It wouldn't if you still kept it within people's personal names. But if the property was owned by a trust, then that trust can be for the current and future beneficiaries of that trust, which is basically what they did in the Victorian ages, and how quite lots of landed estates are actually owned in trusts and are passed down from generation to generation. Right. To exactly avoid inheritance tax and stamp duty and all other obligations that might befall them when one generation passes.
Hamish, wow. It's just, it feels like the swing of the pendulum going back towards yesteryear, but for good reason. And I think, you and I are both effectively old hippies. We want people just to get along, right? And maybe this is in a world beset by potential fascism and good knows what else, the fact that here we are with a push towards a caring society, it should be a good thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think we do it, and of course I'm guilty of it as well. As some of you will notice from some of the podcasts that sort of come through, it's that sort of kind of point the finger. It's not so much a kind of pointing fingers at people. It's trying to actually make people aware of what is happening and what we can do about it. And it's looking at these particular shifts, and it's the whole point of what we do with our podcasts, which is why it's great to have somebody like Wendy coming along with her wisdom, her knowledge, her experience with those buyers, because she's brought out some ideas I hadn't even thought of. But it should guide, and it's a great thing to make, our conversations open in this particular sort of way, because it does enable others who are listening in to start thinking, that's not a bad idea. Do we need to change the planning laws maybe to make it that much easier? Because at the moment they're restricted as to how much you can expand the living space. Right. But if you look at that living space and you look as Wendy suggests, if we have that potentiality within our properties, within our builds within the UK, and there's so much more wealth of what Wendy can actually offer to you, but it's still strange. Who's going to take these steps at the moment? Because there's a big demand on housing. Who is it who can afford to buy them at the moment is one of the things that intrigues me.
Wendy, given that the direction of travel is perhaps not to as many new houses as possible, and praying upon praying that some of the other issues that we talk about in cladding matters are resolved, is there a danger that we're going to get a whole bunch of new properties on the market, but the prices are going to be so high that no one can actually afford them?
This is a fear that a lot of people have, and I think it was actually the London School of Economics did research on this to work out and answer the question once and for all as to whether new build homes in an area would actually make the existing homes less valuable. And the interesting answer is it's the complete opposite, because the new homes, they obviously have a premium, because being brand new, there should be fewer repairs and maintenance needed for them, particularly for the first 2 years.
So you would think.
In theory. And everyone likes to have, well, there's obviously a premium. There's a desire for people to be the first ones to live in a property. So there's clearly a premium that comes with it.
Quite.
But what tends to happen is, rather than pull the rest of the area down because there's an increase of stock in that area of available homes to buy, what it does is it actually pulls the value of the existing homes to being just below the new build homes, because people looking around, they perhaps decide, you know what, I like this area, but I can't get the new build home that I was hoping to buy. What else is there around? So they'll look around the area and they'll see, and they already have, from being attracted to the new build, they would have an idea in their head as to how much they can spend. And then suddenly they see, oh, these homes here are actually a little bit cheaper, and they might have slightly different or bigger gardens. They might have more character features, for example. And then suddenly you've got more people looking in an area where perhaps it had been slightly forgotten, and you'll then end up having more people interested in buying properties in that area.
Wow. So it does seem to me that at least over the last few weeks, we haven't had a lot of positive things to say, Hamish, but it seems like there might be a positive direction. Would you care to have the last word, please, sir?
I do think so. Wendy's brought that up. This is certainly a subject which is well worth considering sort of further on down the lane. So we'll get Wendy back to speak to us about it, because it is important. Because, as I said, the influence of what is happening, people joining the property market, are going to help not just the property market itself, but property contributes quite significantly to the health, the financial health of the country. And without the property industry working effectively, we know what will happen to the, if you like, the economically, what will happen to the country. If we don't have that nice steady sort of movement, we don't have that nice steady flow. We think about this. Those new builds are very, very important. The trouble is they're not leaving enough space quite, but even so, those new builds, they attract so much more work within that area. There's new gardens that need to be landscaped. There's new furniture that's required. There's all of these things are attracting, if you like, work from local people to actually keep the whole thing sort of afloat. So it is a significant contribution. Let's actually sort of keep it moving as much as we can, and let's hope the developers and the investors are looking to do just that for us.
Wow. So I'll tell you what, unusually on a Property Matters, we've had some real positive notes there. To all of you out there who are looking to get into the property market, I would say today's word is care. We need to look and care for each other. And I think you need to put that as a norm in your life, caring for your generations, caring for your family, caring for yourselves. And that will then lead towards the obvious generational living, multi-generational living that Wendy's talked about. Well, we're not there yet. But and to all those developers out there, I'd say please have this thought in mind when you build these new properties. Until next week, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and please do look after that mental health. Bye-bye now.